Okay, reflection 3 related to the dispositions and determining which of the 9 are a growth edge, and how do I see it coming up in an ethical dilemma. So, to begin, I decided to, in my opinion, I think there's a lot of room for growth in all 9. I just think that for myself, I just see it as there's always room to learn more and to be more proficient. But I want to look at the focal point for me was self-reflection, and mainly related to the concept of what came up in the recent role play that we watched for our discussion, where the counselor had this feeling of being liked or wanting to be liked. And it made me think of the quality that I've had to work on, which is this idea of pleasing others and doing so in a way that fuels my ego versus doing actions in a way that would serve the client. And how do you navigate that and what that would look like? So, to kind of piggyback off that, there's a passage in the Corey text where it talks about the manifestations of countertransference, and they list some different examples, and the one that really kind of stood out to me was this needing constant reinforcement and approval, and wanting to, do you have the need of having the approval of your clients, and how willing are you to challenge clients even being at the risk of being disliked. And I think that that's something that I'm going to have to really work on and try to figure out how to navigate and notice when I'm in a place of fueling my client in a way that's not beneficial to them, in order for myself to feel like they like me, quote unquote. And I think this also can come up and relate to the idea of maintaining a level of confidence. And I think because of this need to be liked, to not show that there's a gap in that and just going along and trying to make it work in the dynamic could be a risk that may happen, if I'm not skilled in the situation, to not wanting to admit that I'm not skilled in the situation, to continue that relationship and continue this feeling of being liked. So, relating to that is in the Code of Ethics, where it talks about the boundaries of competence and making sure to lean into, okay, if I don't know, how do I present this information to the client? And my responsibility is to make sure that the client I'm seeing has access to care that's going to be the most helpful for them. And if I don't have that ability to support in a way that's the most helpful, knowing when to take a step back, go and seek, advisement from supervisor to figure out how to benefit the client in the long run when they're matched with someone that is better for them, at the risk of being not liked or not being seen in a certain way. Also, this kind of comes up in the New Mexico Code of Ethics, where it talks about a licensed or registered individual shall give truthful, understandable, and appropriate account of the nature of a client's condition to the client or those responsible for the care of the client. And it makes me think of, so say I have a client that does suffer from delusions, like the one in the example, and it sounded like in that example the client had really felt like the counselor had believed them. And I'm not an expert on that type of treatment, but I wonder if that's causing harm to the client by not being honest with them about, you are actually having delusions, and talking through that and just reinforcing that belief so that the delusions would get stronger, instead of really helping the client kind of figure out how to separate that and try to work on healing and addressing the condition at hand. And it sounded like with this new therapist, she was fueling it to the point where the client was like, "You're the only one that believes me. You believe me. I want to work with you," instead of really giving them the truth that would help benefit them the most. And they did this because of their own ego, of wanting to wanting to please. And this was really just actually causing more harm to the client. So now, when I kind of look at the describing one scenario where this would show up, I think I went into this place of diagnosis and how to, so say a client has, I'm recognizing certain things in the client that they might not want to hear, but they need to hear, right? So it's how do I separate myself from this need to be liked or to please, and to offer a truth to the client that can really help them move forward and help them have a life that's healthier and feels better for them. And I think that's really important to recognize. And when I'm in this position where there's this wanting to please and wanting to be liked, noticing that and noticing that countertransference in myself, taking a minute to pause and then reassess to make sure that I'm not either continuing a counseling relationship where I'm not giving the client the best possible care that they need in order to continue to feel this I'm liked, I'm valued experience. And then also to not give a truth or give direction to a client that I think is really helpful because I'm afraid that they're going to not like to hear it, even though they need to hear it. So, kind of going into how do I plan on responding to similar potential dilemmas within the counseling relationship and outside of it as a counselor, a developing counselor. I think I also want to, really building a network is important, not only with having supervision, but it also within the Society for Advancement of Psychotherapy, it talks about making sure that you're not going it alone, to make sure that there's a group to lean into that's struggling with similar things and bouncing ideas off of each other, making sure that you have that support system when you're confronted with these things, I think will be really helpful. And then also to really learn to be receptive to feedback. I think that's a really clear, that's another point for me where I'm going to have to work on hearing feedback in a way it's not that there's something wrong with me. It's not that there's something that I'm doing that has any merit on my own value. It's just that there's a point where I need to see the feedback as a way to change and grow, from supervision, from others, just to own my flaws, my limits, and making sure that I'm not leading with an ego and I'm leading with a kind spirit in a way where I'm seeing it as what would be the best for my client, not what's going to be the best for me.